Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our new office hours with our Arts Advocacy Team. My name is Nina Oslu-Tunjali, and I serve as Chief Counsel of Government and Public Affairs at Americans for the Arts, as well as the Executive Director of the Americans for the Arts Action Fund. I describe myself visually as a Middle Eastern woman with dark hair wearing a red turtleneck today because it is freezing in Washington, D.C. today. And behind me, I have a Arts Vote backdrop that the Arts Action Fund has been using for several years that was commissioned and donated by Shepard Fairey. Today, we have both ASL interpretation and closed captioning available to you. To select ASL interpretation, please click Interpretation in the Zoom toolbar and select American Sign Language. For Zoom-generated closed captioning, you can toggle on or off by clicking on the arrow to the right of the closed caption button. Office Hours with our Arts Advocacy Team is, as I mentioned, a new and very timely program focused on current events and public policies impacting the arts nationwide. And I think we can all agree that we're kind of on a roller coaster ride these days. And to show for that, we have over 1,700 people registered for today's webinar, which we just put together 3 days ago. And we have over 400 questions submitted. So that's going to be a lot of questions, but thankfully some of our team members have kind of grouped things together that are the most frequently asked questions. So we'll be able to hopefully get through quite a bit. The format of today's 1-hour program will go as follows. In a moment, I'm going to ask our Arts Advocacy Team to introduce themselves, and then I'll conduct a one-on-one interview with Marianne Carter for about 15 minutes. This portion of the program will be videotaped and made available for viewing early next week. And then we'll spend a full 30+ minutes with our Arts Advocacy Team answering your most frequently asked questions, both the ones that you submitted in advance and those posted live in our Q&A box on the Zoom toolbar. But we will open up that Q&A after we conclude the interview with Marianne. Okay, let's get started with our Arts Advocacy Team to introduce themselves. Can you all come on board? And let's start with how I see it left to right. Morgan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Fernari. I am a white woman with short curly hair, and I am currently residing in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I am the Arts Action Fund manager.
Tushar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tushar Swain. I'm Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. I describe myself as an Indian brown man with a bald head, checkered blue shirt, and a blue sports jacket today. And I have my blurred Zoom background on.
Olivia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Tarpley, and I am the Public Policy Manager here at Americans for the Arts. I am a white woman with dark brown hair pulled into a bun, seated in my home office in Washington, D.C., with a lamp and a picture behind me.
Great. And Jay.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Dick, Americans for the Arts. I'm a middle-aged white gay cis male with a brown beard, kind of graying a little bit. And then my background is I have a nice green background with a lot of photos on the back. Welcome.
Thank you. And you will notice, for those in the audience, that when Jay is going to be speaking, Morgan's headshot is going to be lit up because he discovered that his laptop failed him and his audio is not working anymore. So he's coming in through her cell phone to talk to us. So thank you, Jay, for that valiant effort. Okay, we'll see you guys back in a few minutes because we're going to begin our interview now. Welcome, Marianne. And I see you
Thank
with
you.
your fluffy jacket because you're in DC too, freezing.
Yes, 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 I am. I've had
So,
enough.
I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, but before you do that, I just want to say that I'm so grateful to see you back at the NEA. I'm grateful for all your extensive experience in the arts and in politics to help advance the arts in America. So, Marianne, tell us a little bit about um, what your role was during the first term of President Trump's administration and now in his second term since Inauguration Day.
Okay. So, in 8 years ago, it's hard to believe, but 8 years ago, I started at the National Endowment for the Arts. And I asked to be placed there in particular, not necessarily because I'm an artist, I'm not, but
But you're a
because
dance mom.
I am a dance mom, yes. And but I also understand the value of the arts. Um, I'm not only a dance mom, but I'm also the mom of a daughter who has learning differences. And what we discovered was that she learned best when arts were integrated into the teaching method. She was never going to sit and read a textbook. Um, and so it became a very powerful tool for my daughter to be successful. And, I'm so proud because she's a sophomore in college now. We didn't know that that day would ever come. And it's still hard. She still struggles, but she's there and I'm happy about it. And she's a dance major. And so it just seemed natural to go back there this time around because I loved my time there. I really enjoyed the staff. I'm really proud of the work we did during the 4 years I was there. I started out as senior deputy chairman because the President Obama appointee had 18 months left on her term. And so she served out the rest of her term. And then the president nominated me to be chair. And then the Senate confirmed me. And then 6 months later, COVID hit. And so I spent the next 10 months in a box, just like I am today.
That's actually quite unusual that the term was that you wanted to respect the term that President Obama gave to the chairman at that time. Um, so when and tell us what you're doing now.
So I'm in the agency now as senior advisor and basically leading the agency through a lot of the changes that are happening, as you mentioned up front, but also making sure that we continue the great work that we do. That we're still providing access to all Americans to art programming, and just making sure that the agency is run effectively, efficiently. Um, you've heard me say before, we're small but mighty. We punch way above our weight, and that is true. And I just want to make sure that that spirit and that efficiency continues.
Yeah. So speaking of fast and punching above your weight, within a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, you were able to put out brand new guidelines and some changes. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted these new guidelines for grants for projects and not having grants for Challenge America grants anymore?
Sure.
And who was involved?
So everyone was involved. The great thing about coming in on January 21st was I already knew about 75, 80% of the staff. And so they were very comfortable coming and talking to me. I've always had an open door policy, still do. And so many were just comfortable walking in and sort of saying, here's what we've been doing. And, here's where, we might have some deficiencies. And so at the first all staff meeting, I challenged the staff to come up with ways, ideas on how we can be more effective, more efficient, how our resources could be used better. Because a lot of the staff felt that they were pulled in so many directions and had maybe gotten a bit away from um, the core product of what we do, which is giving grants. We're a grant making agency. And so one of the ideas that came forth from the staff was to roll Challenge America into GAP. And I know it caused a lot of consternation. I understand that, but I just want to assure your audience, all applications are viewed independently of other applications. So no one is at a disadvantage by being rolled into GAP. And in fact, they can actually ask for a larger grant if they so choose, where Challenge America grants are limited to $10,000. And so again, that idea came from the staff, and so we rolled it in. But because we were changing things and we changed the guidelines, and the reason we changed the guidelines is we have a new president, and the president wanted to go in a different direction than the previous administration went. So we rewrote the guidelines. And that sort of rolls me into America 250, because that came up quite a bit also, like, oh, you're canceling this to do this. And no, I will just say America 250 has been in the guidelines for the past 5 years. And the reason it was highlighted in these new guidelines that went up is because the semi-quincentennial, or America 250, is next year. And so we thought, let's put that up front and center, since the actual celebration is really, a year away.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, when you say GAP, that is actually the name of the grant category, called Grants
Sorry.
for Projects. No problem. We're in DC. We're
We
all about
speak in
acronyms.
acronyms here.
And Grants for Projects, was that a pre-existing category?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
those are grants. So we have 1 and 2. We call it 1 and 2, 2 different deadlines, but that is really the main grant category.
And I believe at your NEA webinar, was it last week or earlier this week?
Yeah.
Recently.
I think it was Tuesday, this past
You
Tuesday.
put in the money for Challenge America, so it pumped up the amount of money available for grants for projects.
Well, the money's always in one big block.
Okay.
Congress appropriates, and then they say this is the amount of money that needs to be spent on grants. And then, of course, 40% of that automatically goes to the state art agencies. And then we have that pot of money, and it can be divided up in various ways. So, but again, no one is ever compared to each other. Every application either stands or falls on its own. And so it's not as if these applications are now going to be compared to other ones.
So say a small $100,000 budget organization in a rural area is not necessarily in competition with the Metropolitan Opera.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
That's good to know.
And typically, about a little more than a third goes to those smaller. Another third, or a little bit more than a third, goes to the medium size. And then just slightly under a third goes to the really big organizations. So everyone's competitive, or at least every application is competitive on its own.
Got it. I want to read you a headline that appeared on February 7th in the New York Times, which I have to say was almost repeated verbatim in other newspapers and outlets around the country. And I want to know if it's accurate. So New York Times on February 7th ran this headline, and I'm going to read it. Arts Endowment cuts grants dedicated to underserved communities. And then its first line description is, the National Endowment for the Arts said it will instead prioritize work that connects with the upcoming 250th anniversary of American independence, pardon me. So I read your press release, I read the grant guidelines, and I didn't see that. Can you tell us if that's correct and illuminate what's wrong about
That
it?
is not correct. I know that's a shocker. That is not correct. We certainly didn't say it. And in fact, so what there were two different thoughts in the press release, but they put them together. And the first talked about the Challenge America for this fiscal year was being rolled into GAP. And then in another thought, it was we are going to really encourage Projects for America 250. So they took it and said, you're cutting Challenge America to fund America 250. Not true. And there were headlines, Nina, that you probably saw that said we were only funding America
Oh, gosh.
250 projects. And that's not true either. So, but as I told our comms person, you've had 4 great years of bliss, and it's a new day. So, and we have corrected, and some news organizations have corrected, some haven't. And so, we did the webinar. You and I are chatting here. I know you said you had over 1,700 RSVPs. And so, we just are probably going to have to get the word out ourselves.
Yeah, I understand. So you did mention that Challenge America, especially in your press releases and things, that it was being folded into Grants for Projects GAP for FY26. Does that mean it's only going to happen in FY26? Is there a chance it might come back in a future year, depending on whether you see the need and how it plays out this year?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we declared it specifically for fiscal year 26 because, like I said, staff came to me, and I know this is the most dedicated staff in the federal government. And if they have concerns that they're not sure they can get all the work done, then I have to take that very seriously.
Yeah.
And so it's just for this year. Now, again, I challenge staff. How can we be more efficient? Once we get through this next period, we'll all take a look at it. I'm sure there are areas for improvement. I don't know what they are yet, but I always want to hear from the staff because they're the ones actually doing all this work. And so, there may be changes, there may not be. I just don't know what they are yet.
Right.
But if there are, it's really just to make us a more efficient agency and to better utilize staff time and resources.
Yeah. And so when you refer to staff, you're talking about career staff, people who've been there for many years.
Yes.
And you're the
Yes.
only political appointee at the NEA at this moment. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct.
And there's a hiring freeze. I don't know if that applies to political appointees. Okay. Could you also, this was one of the questions that we saw come up, and that is, how do you define underserved communities?
So, great question. And I'm sure many have different explanations, but the way we basically define it is groups that might have limited access to arts opportunities because of factors such as geography, socioeconomic status, a disability. So it really centers around if someone has limited access to arts programming.
Got it. And this is one of the areas, as we just described earlier, or that you described earlier, that can still be funded in grants for projects. Is that
correct? Of course.
So now the big drum roll of the most popular question and concern out there that is connected to your answer about underserved communities, and that is some of President Trump's executive orders. We know they carry the weight of federal law. But I also know that there are several lawsuits pending questioning their constitutionality. But one in particular is Executive Order 14151, which simultaneously reinforces the notion that we must uphold long-held civil rights laws to prevent illegal discrimination, especially in employment situations. But it also prevents and ends preferential treatment for DEIA, both employment and programming. So that programming piece is the extra piece here. In your long-standing standard of assurance of compliance, where every grantee needs to uphold the federal laws and executive orders, that has new attention now, because I think it was probably just a line that people read very quickly. And of course, I'm going to follow federal laws. But this one hits home a little bit differently. So what the question is how can we help potential grantees thinking of applying for grants for projects to determine how this would apply for a proposal that they put forward to the NEA? And specifically, since grants for underserved communities is a valid request for a proposal, but how is it also not preferential for DEIA?
So we are seeking clarification. I would actually like a written answer that we can place up on our FAQs. But here's what I will say to organizations that are thinking about this now. Does your project that you might be applying for, or any programming, or the organization as a whole, do you exclude any group based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, age, sex, in your effort to be inclusive? So,
what would an example of that be?
So let me give let me give you an example. So let's say there is a Hispanic music organization, and they give free music lessons to kids, and their target audience are Hispanic kids, which is fine. But if let's say a young Black musician came for those lessons, or a young white musician, would they be included into the music lesson, or would they be excluded and say, this is for Hispanic kids only? I mean, the answer is obvious. We know what the obvious answer is. Of course, they're going to be included. And so I think the best way for organizations to think this through is, are we excluding everyone in our goal and quest to be inclusive? And I'm guessing for most that is no, we are not exclusive. That's been my experience with the arts organizations, but that's sort of, I think, the first start of running through your programming and your projects. And Nina, if I can, a couple questions we've gotten, that if I can address here as well. So there's been a question about can an organization that might be considered one race, can they apply? So let me use Albanelli as an example, because it's a dance organization. And the answer is yes, of course they can. And because they don't exclude anyone. I know this as a fact because my daughter takes ALE workshops. So, and I use the example about a Hispanic music organization. So if you are solely or predominantly, a certain race or a certain sex, of course you can still apply. Because we're going to be looking at the project and the programming and making sure that there's no excluding anyone. The other thing I want to address is we got questions such as our project is celebrating Black History Month, for example. can we still apply? The answer is yes, of course. You might be applying for Hispanic Heritage Month. And earlier this month, the president signed a proclamation celebrating Black History Month. Yesterday, he had a reception celebrating Black History Month. So yes, those things are fine.
That was really important what you just shared, those examples. I think that answers several of the types of questions that we were getting. I think it also answers this, but I'd still like to speak it out loud because it was asked so much. And that is, if you are either a nonprofit private organization or a governmental agency, and your mission, your values require you to do DEIA programming, to be as inclusive as possible. Somehow it is being interpreted that that means they may not be able to be eligible for an NEA grant. I think you've answered it, but if you could hit it head on, that would be great.
Well, I think it depends on what the project is or what the programming is. Again, it gets back to, just make sure you're not excluding anyone in your effort to be inclusive.
And maybe it's important to state that in their proposal.
It probably should be, and I guess everyone should. But that is, it's actually very common sense. But yeah, they might want to say, even though this might be geared towards, obviously we don't exclude anyone based on race, ethnicity, age, sex, the usual.
Right. And the other thing that you made a nice point about is that it depends on the project, because
Yes.
the NEA is not allowed to give general operating support, seasonal support to organizations. So it's not based on your mission, it's based on your project that you're proposing to the NEA. Is that a correct way of saying it?
Correct. That is correct.
Great. So that's important as you put these proposals together. And then one final question that's related to this is, as you know, state arts agencies, regional arts organizations, local arts agencies are allowed to subgrant NEA funds to local statewide organizations, things like that. That subgrantee doesn't have a direct relationship with the NEA, but do you believe they will need to sign some kind of similar statement adhering to following federal rules and executive orders?
The simple answer is I don't know. Our legal counsel is looking at that because that question obviously has come to us as well.
Okay.
And when we do have an answer, we will post that under our FAQs, but I just don't have an answer to that today.
Okay. And thank you for agreeing to put it on your FAQs when you find out. I'm suspecting you might find out before the March 11th deadline, or maybe it may not matter for the March 11th deadline. We'll see. So I want to wrap this up and ask, is there any final message you would like to leave to arts organizations and artists listening in today?
Well, first of all, Nina, thank you. I appreciate this. I appreciate the relationship we had with AFTA during my first tenure at the National Endowment for the Arts. I think the trifecta, if you will, of Americans for the Arts and the National Assembly of State Art Agencies and the agency was as strong as it may have ever been. And I feel like we really did a lot together. I'm thrilled that Erin is coming in. I think she starts next month.
Yeah, March 24th, Erin, our new CEO.
Okay.
And we hope to see you at our convention. I
expect all of this relationship to continue. I think we really fed a good energy off of each other. So I'm very appreciative of both you and Nassau. And I will leave you with this. I believe And everyone at the agency believes that every American in every corner of the nation should have access to arts programming. And we're committed to that. During my first tenure, we made sure that there were grants in all 435 congressional districts. We thought that was really important to make sure that everyone was being touched. You may have heard me say again in the first Trump administration that we were in almost 800 more counties than private dollars.
Wow.
Or at least private dollars of the top 1,000 foundations that give to arts funding. And we were providing opportunities that private dollars weren't. And that's what makes this agency super important, I believe. And we're effective, we're efficient. I think we're going to continue to do the great work that this agency is known for. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And I'm happy to be here, happy that this has all started. And I'm looking forward to great things and great partnerships.
Thank you so much, Marianne. We're really thankful that you're leading the helm. And we look forward to hearing from you again. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Nina.
Bye-bye.